In the blue light before sunrise, the lake looked like a sheet of glass. Frost thickened on the wing struts. The fabric hummed as the engine warmed. Harold McKay checked the oil with bare fingers that went numb in seconds, slapped the cowling, and climbed into the pilot seat. It was February on Lake Winnipeg, cold that made sound, travel, and judgment short. Harold wore a wool cap under his headset and a scarf. The passenger slid into the right seat with a coil of line and a week's worth of groceries. The radio crackled once, settled, then filled with the quiet of early traffic checks, and weather notes passed like nods. The sky held a white moon and a suggestion of dawn. On the dash, a folded chart showed the lower basin like a pale, lung-shaped field. A metal pencil clipped to the yoke waited for marks he never got the chance to make. He lifted at 7:13, wheels skipping once on hard snow before rising. He climbed to 2,000 feet and set a heading due north on a line he knew from 100 flights. Over the lower basin, past Hecla, along pressure ridges like seams, the gray scrawl of shorewoods miles off, and curved scars where wind had shaved ice to dull metal. The Norseman settled into its groove, the engine steady, the cabin buzzing with the low tin sound that puts thoughts in order on long mornings. At 7:28, the dispatcher in Pine Dock called. Harold answered, breathing loud in the headset. All normal. The little needle on the compass held. Then silence grew. No break, no clipped emergency. Quiet no one recognized as a beginning until it had done its work. The first time a pilot disappeared over Lake Winnipeg, it was called a fluke. Winter of 1952. A Stinson Voyager on a routine feed between settlements that barely had roads on maps. Search crews fanned from shore and came back with nothing you could point to. The RCAF sent aircraft, circled until fuel and daylight ran thin, and corrected the maps empty. No SOS, no debris. Families held funerals with no casket and no ground to mark the missing. A year later, a Cessna vanished in clear weather on a day men still remember as perfect, and the word fluke no longer worked. The lake had a way of keeping what fell into it. By the time Harold lifted into the gray-pink of that February morning, the old stories rode every fuel drum and counter. Pilots talked about whiteout, flat light, a horizon erased so completely a careful man could hold level and fly into the lake. Ridges that looked smooth from above and turned to teeth when you met them. A winter mirage that lifted the world and set it down wrong. They still flew the routes because families waited at the other end. Ruth called the office at 7:50 to make sure his last check was on time. It was. By 9, the dispatcher called her. Routine, a question about a detour Harold had not mentioned. By 10, other pilots scanned his route and called nothing. The weather held, a pale sun set in glass. Men kept eyes down and hands on tools. On a wall map, someone slid a brass pin along a pencil line and stopped at the lower narrows, where current chews the lake and lays dangerous ice like a thin lid. A Lancaster traced long ovals, observers scanning for the wrong shape. A tail, a wing, a line where none should be. Another transport ferried a team to the narrows. The ice had heaved into plateaus and troughs. Men jabbed bars and listened for hollows. Coordinators set a 1-mile search grid from Hecla to Black Island. Altitudes stepped at 500 feet to protect spacing. Wing observers worked binoculars until the cold watered their eyes. Pilots called bearings in 3 digits and read fuel to the quart. On the ice, crews drilled test holes and measured thickness with folding rods, writing numbers on waterproof tags that snapped in the wind. Radio traffic settled into a clipped rhythm, grid letters, times, corrections, an exact language meant to keep emotion out and precision in. The lake hummed the way a building hums when the wind hits it just right, always there, easy to mistake for silence. On the fourth day, the sky stayed perfect, which made it worse. It meant the missing had happened under a sun that teaches pilots to trust eyes, charts, and engine note, and the worst still came. A trapper to the east remembered a long hum fading without the whine of landing. None of it drew a line you could fly. Ruth went to the hangar and sat in an empty cockpit, twin to Harold's, the glass brittle with cold. She traced the checklist with a fingertip: mixture, magnetos, carb heat. In the evening, she opened his flight log and found the last entry as neat as any: date, time, route, pen script ending in a short stroke where the pencil had lifted. 3 days later, the search shifted to recovery. No one wanted to be the first to say it. A priest stood on the ice and read a psalm. Teams kept at it until the lake decided they had done enough and blew their markers into new drifts. In September, a steady storm built 5-foot seas. After, people walked the strand and found a curved piece of aluminum drilled like a wing root. The paint didn't match anything they could swear to. They set it on a table at the office and turned it in the light. For a week, every visitor lifted it and asked if it was from Harold's plane. Then the questions slowed and the part went to a shelf. Winter returned with its same lessons. Another pilot out of Gimli filed a plan and never called at the hour. His company logged time, fuel, weight. The day was crisp and ordinary, the kind pilots note. The search was immediate and exact. By nightfall, a map of the lake lay on the office table with grease pencil boxes and circles. Somewhere under that, a line on a chart stopped mid-lake. In the end, there were 3 names tied to the missing flights from those years, more if you counted the boatmen who swore they saw a wing in clear water and never found the spot again. Older pilots leaned toward plain answers: flat light, engine ice, a shortcut, a missed horizon, a wingtip brushing air turned to ground. They said it without cruelty. They still stepped into cockpits because the lake was how their families ate. Ruth kept a small box on a shelf with Harold's flight log, the pencil run to a stub, and the scarf that still held a trace of cold. Some winters, she drove back to Hecla and stood above the water and said nothing. On good days, she told how much he loved the quiet at dawn, the way skis skimmed when the surface was right, how he would call at the half hour just to say the air was smooth and the engine steady. On maps, the lake looks manageable, but in winter, under a sky that can turn a horizon into a rumor, Lake Winnipeg is its own country of ice. The men who vanish leave shallow footprints, snow marks, a breath erases, radio log contrails, a pencil line on a chart. The record shows safe weather and machines that should have flown those miles. It also shows a lake practiced at keeping. It returns only what it is finished with. Years later, a new pilot lifted off that same strip with better instruments and a brighter radio. He climbed, crossed the lower basin, and watched sunlight find seams in the ice. He made his calls at the half hour, the hour, and at landing. Somewhere under his miles, beneath ice and seasons of thaw, lay a story without an ending. The lake kept it. The living marked their calendars and kept going. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories, if you dare.